because a couple of reasons. One is I like to have a record and a chronicle of the stuff that I do, and I guess the other reason why I do that is because I'm trying to show you guys the kind of social media type of materials that you should be preparing as you go about getting evangelism for your campaign. Who wants to take photos of this while I'm talking? Anybody? Want to take some pictures? Okay. Everybody know Ellie Raindance? Everybody know Ellie? Filmmaker in residence at Raindance, Canada. Okay. So there's anywhere between 35,000 and 45,000 independent documentaries and feature films being made every year. Of that number, and this is across North America, of that number, only 600, so between 1 and 2%, are getting film festival circuit, or going on the film festival circuit, or getting film festival action. Of that 600, 1/3, or 200 pictures, are making it into Sundance. We all know Sundance. Who doesn't know Sundance? Okay, great, no hands. Sundance, of 18,000 submissions to Sundance, this year at Sundance 2012, there were 18,000 submissions. Of that 200, 20%, only 40 films are getting any kind of distribution action, any kind of distribution worth speaking about. I'm not talking lucrative distribution, just distribution that is actually you can actually use as part of your outgoing promotional materials. And of those 40 pictures, only one picture is getting distribution on the par of a film like we were discussing tonight before the meeting started, Pariah. Anybody heard of that movie, Pariah, by Dee Reese? Pariah? That film got distributed, I think, by Sony Pictures Classics. Only one film of the 40 is getting the big enchilada, the big, we call it the lottery method. You know, you win the lottery. Only one picture. So those are the odds that you're facing as independent filmmakers, whether you're a documentarian or a feature filmmaker. When you're going out there trying to get traction for your stuff, those are the odds you face. So, let the work begin. Now it gets a little bit more difficult. So crowdfunding. Who knows what crowdfunding is? Anybody not heard of crowdfunding before? Anybody? Crowdfunding? Antonia? No? Jeremy? You know what crowdfunding is? You do? Okay. Elevator pitch. Crowdfunding is one kind of crowdsourcing. You go out to the crowd and you ask for money for production. Full stop. That's crowdfunding. Crowdsourcing is when you put out ideas and you send it out to the masses, and you're looking basically for people to submit various ideas to you about things that you want to know about. Crowdfunding has become popular in the last little while. Kickstarter was a platform that was created in 2008 by 3 people. It's kind of a way of getting public buy-in to your picture without actually giving shares. You know, you can't go online and give shares in your movie. It's illegal to do that. In Canada, one drawback with Kickstarter, it's not available to people in Canada unless you have a US partner that can collect money on your behalf. There's 2 platforms that are quite popular. Anything else in crowdfunding is pretty much not worth discussing. Anybody know what those 2 platforms are? 2 top crowdfunding platforms in the world. Anybody, just grab it. I already said one of them. And? Indiegogo. Indiegogo. Anybody heard of Indiegogo before? How many people did not hear of Indiegogo? Never heard of Indiegogo before? Show of hands once more. There's over 10 people that have not heard of Indiegogo. Okay. In Canada, you have to know about Indiegogo. You absolutely have to know about Indiegogo. Because I just said the reason why. In Canada, you cannot use Kickstarter unless you have a US partner with a US bank account and a US mailing address. Indiegogo is the only way you can raise money in Canada through crowdfunding, through Indiegogo, because there are no international restrictions with respect to raising the money. How does crowdfunding work? In 2 different, it actually works this way. You set a target, you want to raise a certain amount of money. You set a time frame that you want to raise that money. Optimal time frames, and we'll get into all of these things, by the way, during the actual seminar on crowdfunding, which takes place on May the 10th, which is the 2nd week of May. I'll get into actual nitty-gritty specifics during that seminar. I'm just going to go over things in a very broad-based, kind of like a teaser overview, the 2-minute teaser. You set a target. The ideal number of days is between 30 and 40 days. I would even go less, 25. So let's say that you were taking a target of 25,000, you wanted to raise it in 25 days, excuse me, on Indiegogo. That's a valid target. A lot of people try to do things like that. A lot of filmmakers are successful raising money in that way. I'm trending on one particular crowdfunding campaign now. How many people have heard of the Pebble? Pebble? Like Pebble? Ellie? Heard of the Pebble? Anybody heard of the Pebble? Okay. Kickstarter right now is being bombarded by a crowdfunding campaign for something called the Pebble. They're $3.8 million raised in the past 5 days. The campaign is supposed to last 35 days, if I'm not mistaken. It's for a product, not for a film. You can use Kickstarter or Indiegogo for anything, not just for films. You can use it for products, you can use it for craft projects, you can use it for, if I want to take a trip to Nepal, India, and Bangladesh, I can try to put an appeal out on Kickstarter. Check it out when you get home. Google, or if you have a data plan on your cell phone, just check out Pebble as I'm talking. The amount that they're raising increases like the monolith. Every 5 minutes it jumps by like another 15 grand. It's almost unheard of. You never heard of this thing before. And it actually got write up by a press organization in the States called Engadget, which is like TechCrunch, and the minute it got mentioned there, that's when it started to take off. There have been no independent films that have raised $3.8 million on Kickstarter or Indiegogo ever. So, but you just might very well be the person who does that, by the way. Okay, how do you do this? Well, I'm not going to get into the actual specifics of how you run a crowdfunding campaign, because that you'll have to show up on May the 10th for, and I'll get into the actual specifics, and we'll go through several flowcharts, and we'll go through several lists, and we'll go through the personnel, and we'll go through the techniques and the timing and how a day in the life of a crowdfunding campaign works. We'll get into all that stuff during the actual seminar. But suffice it to say, you can't just go out and ask people. It's not free money. Crowdfunding is not free money. People think that just because crowdfunding is available, in other words, as an option in the umbrella of monies that they can raise for their documentary or their feature film, they think that it's their money. It's not found money. Crowdfunding is bonus money. It's possibly maybe money. It's the money that you can raise if you're good at crowdfunding, but you don't automatically get to have that money just because it's available. Comprises no more than 15% of your budget. If you raise any more than 15% of your overall projected budget for your project, you're really swimming in it. If you get anywhere between 10 and 15%, that's pretty much the historical averages of what people are raising with crowdfunding. There are ways to pursue and wage a crowdfunding campaign in order to actually reach your target. I talk in the seminar about if you do, for example, have a US partner with Kickstarter and you're looking to use Kickstarter as your platform. I talk about the branding problems between using Indiegogo versus Kickstarter and why it's better to use Kickstarter as opposed to Indiegogo. The bottom line with Kickstarter is because it's an all-or-nothing Reno, Las Vegas style type of crowdfunding, which means if you don't raise your target, you don't get to keep any of the cash. But that's much better for your branding and your PR, because if you have a higher number, in other words, you've raised $35,000 in 25 days, that's something that you can use later in your electronic press kit and in your press materials. You can say that you were successful in raising amount of money within a very compressed period of time, and that can only serve you well as you go through the process. People that have crowdfunded in the past generally have no problem crowdfunding in the future. I've been part of 5 crowdfunding campaigns. One filmmaker who had successfully crowdfunded 4 times, and so every time we went out to the crowd for additional cash, and it went in these amounts: 15,000 US, 20,000 US, 25,000 US, and 25,000 US. Every single time we went out, we raised the money, and we oversubscribed. In all of the cases, I think in the first case we raised 21,000, and slightly over the target in every one of the other Kickstarter cases. Don't be greedy with crowdfunding. Just because it's available to you doesn't mean that you should ask for $100,000 as your first campaign. A lot of filmmakers think that just because they can, that they shall, and that they do, but it doesn't work like that. And we'll get into it in the seminar about why, certain amounts are appropriate and why other amounts are not appropriate. A reasonable amount to crowdfund, if you've never crowdfunded before, a reasonable amount to raise, $15,000 to $20,000, that's a reasonable amount. Anything more than that, people are already kind of saying to themselves, on what basis is this person asking for $50,000? I've seen campaigns recently that have tried to raise $50,000 and then bombed. And basically because the person had no credentials, they had no filmmaking credentials, they had no IMDb profile, they had a successful career, for example, as a video blogger, so they were able to demonstrate that they knew how to engage an audience, but they had no filmmaking chops per se. So going out and raising $50,000 was not altogether successful. Crowdfunding is also a way to demonstrate proof of concept for your film. It's like any other kind of fundraising. If you can raise funds for your movie, it demonstrates that there's a reason why people would want to put money into it. Of the various tentacles of funding that go into raising a budget for a movie that you want to shoot, whether it's a doc or a feature, it doesn't matter. When you get money from somebody, and it could be telefilm, and it could be a tax jurisdiction, it could be tax credit money, it could be some kind of a kickback, it could be a private investor, it could be crowdfunding, it could be another kind of soft money regime. That's proof of concept that what you're shooting is good. I said, like when I was over there, I was saying the good films don't get distribution, the great films do, and that the great stories actually are the ones that will get success of any kind. If you're getting crowdfunded, if you set a Kickstarter target of 25 and you raise it, that's a pretty good idea. You can use that as kind of a proof of concept, a validation in your own mind that your film has some legs, that it's going to go places. If you don't raise money for your film that you think is fantastic and maybe a handful of other people in some kind of a test market have said is good, but you don't raise your crowdfunding target, take a few steps back from your overall marketing strategy and say to yourself, wait a second here, maybe it's not as good as I think it is. Maybe I have to tweak some of the elements before I go out to the crowd again and ask for cash. In terms of specifics of how we do crowdfunding, as I've said, you should come to the seminar. You're going to get a lot of good takeaways. You're going to get a lot of good, valuable case study experiences. I'll show you some things that have worked and the reasons why they worked. Some sneak preview stuff. What you'll see at the seminar are the kinds of materials that you prepare as you go about the 30 days, what we call extra diegetic content, or in simple language, the stuff that doesn't make it into your movie, and the reason why you would use extra diegetic content as you go about trying to get an audience for your picture. It's all about audience, by the way. Audience and audience engagement. What's the primary job of an independent filmmaker? It's not to crowdfund, it's not to use Facebook, it's not to use Twitter, it's not to use sexy devices and sexy toys and sexy cameras. It's to engage audiences. PMDs, like myself, collaborate with people like Ingrid, who's in who's in PR and it's a combination of PMD and PMR. By the way, PMD, not PMT. I go to some continents and it's premenstrual tension. I get people telling me PMS. Happens to me at a few film festivals, PMD. So I do collaborate with people like Ingrid because as part of the marketing strategy that I'll design for clients, it does have a publicity element which basically should be done by professionals. Some PMDs are publicity type hounds, they're good with PR, but they don't specialize in it. Somebody like Ingrid brings to the table contacts, the experience, contacts with newspapers, media organizations, access to film festivals. She knows programmers at TIFF, for example, in this city, or at Hot Dogs. She knows those people. So you want to work with people like that, and you want to pay their rates, and you want to pay them promptly. You don't want to try to negotiate with them, because they're actually bringing you eyeballs. They're bringing you contacts that you couldn't get on your own. That's not to say that you couldn't approach somebody at a film festival and not get into the film festival, because as I said, if the film is really good, someone's going to want to program it in their festival. If the film is really good, somebody's going to want to give you money to make that movie. But you want to work with the professionals because they bring to the table things that you can't necessarily do on your own. you would want to work with a PMD, for example, on crowdfunding strategy, because I know stuff that works that you wouldn't necessarily know. I've invested the time, Ingrid's invested the time, we have the experience to actually share with you the time that we've invested to do the stuff that you would have to spend the years and the months and the weeks to try to put together on your own. It's not to say that you can't do what we do. It's not to say that you couldn't run your own film festival, but you'd have to put a lot of time and effort and energy into it that the people that do these things for a living do. Okay, so that's pretty much the overview of the who, what, when, where, why, how, and when. Did I say when and the how? The 5 W's and the H. Anybody have any questions about crowdfunding that I can answer that's not as specific as I'll get into during May the 10th? Or anybody have any questions about what I've already asked? And say your name and say what your film is.
My film is a short movie, actually.
Short movie? What's it called?
No, it's called Kidnapping Lorraine.
Kidnapping Lorraine. And does it have a website?
No.
Does it have a Twitter handle? Does it have a Facebook page? Do you have a Facebook page? Personally?
Just Facebook profile.
Your own?
Yeah. And my question is, how an independent filmmaker works with PMD?
How does an independent filmmaker work with a PMD?
Yeah.
Okay. PMDs don't do anything spectacularly unique that a filmmaker themselves can't do. So what the hell do we need PMDs for? You as a filmmaker, which is the trinity of writer, director, producer, you don't necessarily have time to be in 3 places at once, or you don't have time to do the things that a PMD would do. Has anybody heard of the PMD's position before you actually came into the meeting tonight? Who's heard of what the PMD does? Okay, you've heard of it. Anybody else know what the PMD is before I actually sat here at the table? Anybody besides the Raindance Canada Brain Trust? Jeremy? Never heard of it before? Never heard of it before. Okay. Producer, marketing and distribution. Producer of marketing and distribution. And we're actually seeking a PGA, Producers Guild of America accreditation. Transmedia producer already has that accreditation, so on the rolling credits of a picture, I'll answer your question in a moment. So PMDs are also getting one. John Reese. Who knows John Reese? Anybody heard of John Reese? Okay. John Reese? Jim? No? So John Reese is a documentarian. He's an American guy in California. He shot a documentary in 2007 around the world called Bomb It. Like Vomit? Bomb It? And basically it's about street art and graffiti around the world. He was in like 10 countries. And it was a great documentary. He was sold out in Tribeca in New York. Around the block. 2 times. Didn't get a distribution deal. How is this possible? Well, as of 2007, distribution started to change. So he wrote a book called Think Outside the Box Office. And in that book he describes exactly what the role of the PMD's job is. So people started to become PMDs in 2008, 2009, 2010, the job started coming to the fore. What John did, to answer your question, was he described a position that was required of every filmmaker to do, that a lot of filmmakers did not have the time to do. It was a uber position of PR, promotions, publicity, social media outreach, editing, video blogging, regular blogging, film festival attendance, live event promotion, pressing the flesh, fundraising, pounding the pavement, street teams, plastering the city red, going out schmoozing, going to after parties, cocktail parties, and backslapping. I mean, that's how this Matchstick Men, which was a film that Ridley Scott shot, I think, in 2008, that's how that film was made. The 2 guys who made the movie said, we went to a cocktail party, we were really, really into it, but we decided we're going to go that night. And as a result of going to that cocktail party on that night, they were able to get Ridley Scott's interest in the film. And Ridley Scott does these big, epic movies, as we know, Blade Runner, Alien, and Gladiator. So he was there, he had 3 months open in his schedule. These guys showed up at the cocktail party, boom, okay, small segue. So the independent filmmaker needs to do all these things that I described. The PMD doesn't do everything that I just described, but organizes captains the campaign to make sure that all of these things are being done, and gets their hands dirty. I get my hands dirty. I do a lot of these things. Not every PMD does. A lot of PMDs, like John, now don't have to do them. Now he kind of like looks at it from above and he says, go here, go there, you do this, you do that, you do that, you get the street team ready, you set up that live event, you call these theatrical bookers, you get this publicist working on this particular aspect of the release, we submit to this film festival, and that's what the PMD does. Smaller movies, smaller scale, smaller budget, or no budget pictures as they're called, can work with a PMD who does everything that I just described. But if the picture is worth, let's say, $500,000 budget, and I've worked on films that are $2.5 million, then you need a personnel. Then you need a team of interns, some production coordinators. You need to work with other kinds of producers, and you take your marching orders from the producer, of the project, whatever. Why would you want to have a PMD? Because there are things that you can't do on your own, and maybe I have, again, like I've invested the time doing all these things. You get the answers faster by paying my fees and by putting me on for a certain number of months, or other PMDs. There's other people out there, depending on where you are. I just happen to be local in Canada, which is kind of an advantage. So does that answer the question?
Just a thought about crowdfunding. Like we need, as independent producers, we need funding.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I could find someone who would help me with crowdfunding, like for commission or something.
But why do you want to crowdfund? What's the reason?
To produce a movie.
Why crowdfunding? Why can't you ask 20 people in this room for $1,000 each? Why can't you call up a couple of rich friends and say, hey, would you give me 15 grand? Why can't you apply to telephone?
I don't have rich friends and I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to raise funds.
Crowdfunding is not for everybody. Just because it's out there doesn't mean you use the platform. Not every project, by the way, is made for a crowdfunding campaign. It all goes back to the goals of the movie. Why are you making a movie? And I'll just name some of the goals randomly. Are you looking to be a millionaire? In other words, the money, call it the money game. Are you looking to solidify relationships? For example, Ellie Raindance might be making a movie with Ryan Reynolds, Canadian actor. Now he's a little bit maybe too big for our britches, but he's got a movie that he's making with Ryan Reynolds. Ellie's got a lot of scripts in the pipeline, but he wants to work with Ryan Reynolds into the future. I'm going to make a cheap movie with Ryan Reynolds now. Ryan Reynolds agrees to make a movie with Ellie because he likes Ellie, and these guys went to high school together. We're solidifying a relationship. I'm going to make no money from this movie, and neither is Ryan Reynolds. But they agree to make a movie because it helps them get the things going. That's the second goal. Third goal, get up on the board. Remember I mentioned people that go to crowdfund, they have no credentials, they have no filmography, they have no crowdfunding experience. Get up on the board. In other words, the IMDb, that's the biggest board around. You might just want to get up on the board. Are these all mutually exclusive goals? No, there's Venn diagrams, like there's intersecting circles. This, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If your goal is not money, you might not need to crowdfund your picture. But if your goal is to solidify relationships, you might need that extra budget too. In other words, using Ellie as an example, he might need that extra $15,000 because Ryan Reynolds has a personal trainer that he works out with every day, and he needs that guy. That's just like his guru. I need that, So you might need to raise that money. Why do we raise money? For post-production? Why do you raise crowdfunding? Post-production? Film festival run? It's like $150 like each submission fee, to every first-tier film festival, $200. Why do I want to crowdfund? I don't know. Maybe I need development budget. Development budget. Development's like anywhere between $15,000 to $25,000, and it's generally an item in the line item. It's generally a line item in the budget that's not accounted for. Nobody thinks about development as a recoupment cost. But if I'm a producer and I get a production company interested in making my movie with me, that development budget has to go into the final budget. I need to recoup that cash. You might be able to get that through crowdfunding, for example. Right? There's a variety of different reasons why you use crowdfunding. Just because it's there doesn't mean you should use it. You have to analyze the reasons why you need it, and the reason why that's important is because when you go to the public and ask people for money, they're going to go to you, but I've got 85,756 other projects I can crowdfund. Why should I crowdfund yours? You have to have an answer for that question, and it has to be convincing, and it has to be related to your excellent and great film. Right? It has to be connected to your film. See what I mean? You could crowdfund, but it might not be for you. But it might be for you. We have to talk about if it is or if it's not. Yeah. Come with me after. We'll talk about your specific project.
Why do people do?
Why to crowdfund?
Yeah, well, I mean, why do people actually give
Why do we
money?
go to the moon?
Why would they
Because it's there.
What do they get out of it? Just for benefit of saying that they support an independent film? It's just saying why.
I think,
They don't get their name on the credits. They don't, they can't. Can they?
yeah.
Oh, they can.
Like, donate $5,000.
Does everybody know what's going on here? Yeah. Why do people crowdfund? Like, why do you?
Yeah. Why would you give them money?
Why?
What's the incentive for
I'm asking you for $50,000, and you see my videos, my pledge video on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. How do I explain to you why I want your money? Right? Like, that's the question here. How do I justify asking you for money? On what basis? Right? It's a variation of what we were talking about here. In other words, like just because you can ask for money doesn't mean that you do and should. You have to justify the reason why you're asking for it. And then the follow-up piece here was, does everybody know how crowdfunding works? We'll get into it on the 10th, but you basically ask for money in tranches on like sliding scale amounts of pledge donations. 10, 50, 25, 200, whatever, there's different amounts, all the way up to like anything like as big as 10 grand. And then you also give them rewards. You don't just ask for money. In lieu of you giving me $500, I give you maybe a walk-on set. You get to walk on set and shoot. If Ryan Reynolds is in my primary cast, you get to take pictures behind the scenes of Ryan Reynolds. You might get an executive producer credit. You might get an associate producer's credit. You might get like a really interesting box set of.
So you're selling incentives.
Yeah.
Incentive type.
And that's where the novelty comes about with crowdfunding in terms of designing pledge rewards that break through the clutter of what everything else is going on online. Most crowdfunding campaigns are cookie cutter versions of the things that are already being done, and it's incumbent upon the filmmaker to decide or to research the pledge rewards that are already out there, find ways to offer things that are not already being offered. And it's like Babe Ruth, hit them where they ain't. Like, just hit them where they ain't. Just wherever basically territories that people have not colonized yet, go out there and get that, design a pledge reward that goes around that. So we're getting close to time. If anybody has any specific questions about their films and want to ask me about it, I'll be just milling about after. Unless there's anything that I can answer in like 2 seconds. Yeah?
Stage, if I have a really good script, sorry, no, sorry.
No? Okay.
If I have a really good script that I want to raise development, but like that's all I have is a script. Is that a good stage? Or
Yes. Yes, it is. If the script is good, and I want to know by whose standards it's good. In other words, is it getting coverage by the big 5 agencies, in LA, and then you've got great script coverage, and I can read it. You can make some of those notes available online, by redacting it, like by blanking out the names and all the personal details. Is that the basis? There's no time limit. Right now, if you think you have something great, you can go and crowdfund that. There's no time limit. It's after, before, during, simultaneous. It's like every variation under the rainbow. And if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, TheRealADM, @TheRealADM. I have cards if you want them. You can follow me there and answer questions like that. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Adam and Ingrid, we just want to thank you so much for coming out and chatting with our members and maybe some of the new members and just people interested in Raindance about what you do and what you can share with them. We're now actually going to do a draw for both Adam and Ingrid's courses, so get out your tickets that I handed your way.